Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and look, the microphone is back out because this is a discussion video. So, yeah, specifically we're going to be talking about the PS5 Pro that was just made formally announced, my basic thoughts on it, and everything, and yeah. So before we do that, though, if you guys can do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. It's in the description. Thank you so much. Now, right. So here's basically what happened. It's the day I'm recording this, yesterday, on September 10th, 2024. Sony revealed the worst kept secret in video games currently, which was that, oh, the PS5 Pro is coming. Sure. And initially, you know, my reaction, like everybody else's, was just kind of one of like, because what we got out of it, well, let's talk about it, okay? So from a technical perspective, what it is it's very similar to the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X at the time, which is just a mid-generation cycle update. So this is not the PS6, it's not the next generation of hardware. It's just they took some aspects of the PS5 and they said, okay, let's make a couple of changes here and there. Now, some of those changes, like it has a 2 terabyte SSD in it, so it has more storage. I know it has some other additional processing capabilities. They're using something with AI for additional rendering and so on and so forth. Like that kind of stuff is fine. That's the kind of stuff we would expect out of it, or at least in the concept of a PS5 Pro. But where it got everybody, myself included, was the price tag and the fact that it didn't have a disk drive. These are the two major points. So I made a simple tweet about this that got around apparently, but basically the point is it's going to retail for $699.99, so essentially $700 for the purpose of discussion, within the United States before tax. It does not include a disk drive. However, it is compatible with the external slim model PS5 disk drive that Sony already released, which you can buy for an additional $80 again before tax in the United States. And so that brings us to $780 and does not include the stand, which is an additional $30 if you actually want that. So for those international viewers, $780, the reason the United States always separates its taxes from stuff like that is because of how big the country is and how tax codes are not federal. There is no such thing as federal sales tax in the United States. It's determined by one level on the state, second level on the county, third level on the city. So as a general average, it's about 6% across the country, but there's tons of exceptions to that. So like Alaska, Oregon, Delaware, New Hampshire, Guam all have 0% sales tax. Then, you know, other parts of the country will have, like, I think like American Samoa has the highest at like 15% sales tax, but the general average is at about 6%. That's why I know, to the irritation of particularly the Europeans, that's why our sales tax is never pre-included, because we don't do one across the board. So with sales tax on top of that, you know, it obviously can range, but let's just start at that base of $780. That means if you were to buy it in one of those 5 tax-free parts of the US, that would be the cheapest it could possibly exist at. Now, when I first saw that, like everybody out there, my reaction to it was one of just absolute shock. Like, you know, ignoring the disk drive element of it, so just $700. The idea that we've reached that point where we're out there just saying, yes, the new hardware is going to cost $700. Now, that's not unprecedented. That happened with the 3DO back in like 93 or whatever it was, $700 then. But that was something that was considered like a one-off, like at the time anyway, kind of a Rolls-Royce type of console that you were either really into it or you weren't. This, I think, was just kind of a shock to the system for a lot of people, because it also is reflective of other external factors. One of the most obvious, which is inflation, as well as the supply chain issues that led to the PS5 having problems in the first place, and how everything in terms of manufacturing is restructuring. Now, what this is going to sound like almost is like I'm saying, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. It's okay that it's this expensive. That's not at all the claim I'm making. I'm just trying to give some perspective here. Personally, I'm not buying this. I know that's kind of a bold thing for a guy who owns a Joy-Sound Festa and the GPS model of the Sega Saturn and all that. I buy a lot of dumb stuff. But the PS5 Pro, I think, is the first major new release where I'm just like, pass. So let's talk about all that as to why. So I'm not going to defend the price. The price is objectively wrong, but I do want to give it a little context because adjusted for inflation, this actually isn't that bad compared to some previous hardware. Like we just talked about how the 3DO at one point had the exact same price tag, but was 30 years removed. If you look at Sony's own PS3, which retailed at $600 back in 2006, adjusted for inflation today, that's like $950. So this is actually a lot cheaper than that. However, there is a key difference there, which is that the PS3 was the next generation of hardware and had all sorts of new capabilities, and that we were ushering in the post PlayStation 2 success environment. The PS5 Pro is literally just an upgraded version of a system that already exists, and based on historical precedent of other slimline consoles and things like that. Sorry if you hear sirens or anything like that outside. There's construction and stuff going on. But based on that history, we can kind of deduce that the PS5 Pro probably only has like a 2 to 3 year lifespan, 4 at best. Not that it'll completely die, but by that point, we'll likely see some version of what we would think of as PlayStation 6. And so this system would probably be mostly irrelevant. But, you know, to be fair, and back in the day, 4 years would have been an entire generation. Nowadays, it's kind of a half generation. So I almost kind of get where they're coming from. But I still don't support it. And that's the part that I think is probably going to be shocking to a lot of people, because I do love my obscure oddball consoles, but I can't get behind this one, partially because the price tag is, of course, obscene, and it's obscene on the surface of it. Again, if you put in that little, asterisk of, well, with inflation, this, sure. I still don't want it. The biggest reason I don't want it is actually the disk drive. The fact that this came out with no disk drive by design tells you everything you need to know about Sony's intentions. Like, it's got a token compatibility with the external disk drive. But what that tells me is they have no faith in the future of physical media. And that's not actually shocking. That's not like some big news reveal here. Sony has been kind of abandoning physical media more and more and more as time goes on, which is really very depressing, because not only as someone who's a big proponent of physical media, it's very apparent that, Sony is so directly involved with it. Set aside that, PlayStation is their video game ecosystem. These are the people that have a share in the music CD, like the CD-ROM, in the DVD-ROM, obviously in the Blu-ray and the 4K Blu-ray. Like, this is their format. But more and more we're hearing about Sony's going to stop allowing pressings of this and pressings of that, etc., making it harder and harder for physical media to strive, because they themselves have a role in it, and they themselves are no longer willing to entertain it. So this isn't just scary because it means that this is the end of physical media for consoles. This could mean, in a lot of ways, it's at the end of physical media from that perspective as well. That said, I do think that, Blu-rays and so on will endure much longer than this, but it is starting to put it out there that its corporate overlord is maybe less willing to cooperate than they used to be. And that bothers me. It also tells me that going forward, any sort of PS5 physical edition will probably not ship with any sort of PS5 Pro code built into it anyway. It'll likely be like, okay, yeah, we see that you have the PS5 Pro, we see that you have the disc drive, and we see that you have the disc for this game. There's an online patch for that kind of support, so we're just going to let you download it, which, to be fair, is what Microsoft's been doing forever. So it's kind of, I'm just out. On that particular system, I think I'm just out. I think the only context in which I would get a PS5 Pro would be either with a substantial price cut, a total reversal of policies, those fantasies aside. I think that the only context in which I'd really get one is like way down the road, when they're like, assuming they're ever like common, and you can get one for relatively cheap just to kind of try it out, maybe even hack it at that point, because that's the sad reality with a lot of consoles, is after you get past like the 6th generation in particular, which would be your Dreamcast, PS2, GameCube, Xbox, new one. After you get past that point, most console preservation comes down to the hacking and fan community, as their corporate overlords that made them in the first place don't really value archiving that online content and making it functional indefinitely. So I just hate that that's the place video games, particularly console games, has gone. And while I was never on board with PC gaming, I at least respect what they're doing over there. They know what they have, they know what they want, they know how they want it to be. Whereas with consoles, it's like they're sort of lying to you. They're now kind of portraying it like, no, we're still the bastion of this, but really they're not. And that really upsets me. And with Sony, it's interesting to watch this play out, because if you think about it, you really have like you basically have four companies responsible for our video games. And what I mean by that is you obviously have Sony and the PlayStation brand, Microsoft and the Xbox brand, Nintendo and currently the Switch brand. And then you obviously you can give PC basically to Steam. Like obviously Epic and GOG are competitors, etc. But let's be real, most people will argue that Steam dominates that space. And obviously Microsoft themselves still competes in there as well. So with each one of them, I can kind of see the plan. With Steam, it's, just continue what you're doing because they effectively already won. I mean, Epic can survive because of all that Fortnite money. It doesn't really matter. They're eking out just fine. GOG gets away with the fact that they're probably their most DRM friendly group of all of that. And then they have a nice little base all themselves, but I don't think anybody, even the most avid PC gamer, which probably wouldn't be watching this video anyway, would argue that anyone other than Steam wins in that space. Same with Microsoft. With Microsoft, I can tell what they're doing, at least what they were doing. Their plan was to basically turn Xbox as a plan, as an ecosystem, the hardware, everything into the Windows equivalency of the console gaming universe, meaning Xbox must just be integrated into everything. It's been their plan ever since. The original Xbox existed for the purposes of making sure that consoles were not a direct threat to the home PC market, which I know in 2024 sounds ridiculous, but back when they were making the system, there was legitimate belief that PCs might have been a temporary fad type of thing and that consoles were going to dominate. At one point, the Dreamcast, of course, sold with a keyboard and all that. PS2 was at one point touting itself as your PC replacement. This was a real thing for the Zoomers who don't know this. And obviously, the point of the Xbox was to get in there and kind of control the narrative of where that industry went. It cost them a fortune, but it worked out because they were able to say, okay, we moved the industry the way we wanted. We saved Windows. That's what they cared about. Then they stuck around for other reasons and eventually kind of said, what if we just kind of make Xbox as a service that kind of integrates? That's what the idea behind Game Pass was. And of course, all the monopolies of what they're basically doing of absorbing a bunch of different companies make Xbox as the equivalency of Windows, just an expectation within that sphere. Because even on PC gaming, when you're playing Steam, you're still loading it from Windows. So Microsoft is still involved, unless you're using Linux and you're like that super hardcore guy, which is fine. With Nintendo, the plan is obvious as well. It's stay off in our corner and just do our own thing. We're not trying to go head to head with anybody. We're going to dominate this one particular space. And they're obviously very good at that. They even get along particularly well with Microsoft too. So they don't even come off as like competition there. With Sony, I don't know what they're trying to do. It's, I look at them and I say, okay, well, they tried to get into Nintendo's space sort of, in the fact that they released the PlayStation Portal. They're like, hey, look, we know you like your Switch that you can go from the system to the TV. You can do it portably on TV or whatever. Well, we got the special controller that lets you kind of do the same thing. All right. So that's them trying to do that. And then at the same time, they're like, well, we see Microsoft is like trying to do all these like download services and game subscription services. Well, we're going to do that too. It didn't really go as well, and it didn't nearly get the credibility of the same, thing. And they can't afford to just lose and hemorrhage money on it the way Microsoft was doing. They also can't absorb corporations the same way Microsoft was doing. So that didn't pay out as well. And then they're also now playing the PC market where they're putting at least their exclusive games onto the PC. And that one I get more. That one actually makes more sense because it's like they were just kind of sitting on games they could have been getting free money out of on the PC market from people who are never going to come over to PlayStation. Fair enough. Although you can make the argument that if you are the guy who wanted some super exclusive PlayStation experience and you knew it was now coming to PC, then you had less of a reason to care about getting a PlayStation. With Xbox, that model kind of worked just because they were like, well, we exist on PC anyway, and that's really the point of this, is to maintain that. With Sony, that doesn't make sense. They've been out of the computer business for years. I mean, the VAIO is a dead line, to my knowledge anyway, and they never made OSs anyway. So it's not really the same thing. My point is, I think Sony doesn't have a really particularly bold strategy here. I don't think they really know what direction they're going, and they're kind of trying like 20% of what everyone else is doing and just hoping that keeps them afloat. I'm not saying they're going out of business. Don't misunderstand my words here, but I I don't see where this goes. So like they've had an interesting few weeks at the time of this recording. Of course, they had the Concord debacle, which is going to hurt them massively. They put in 8 years, they spent $100 million on a game that ultimately basically doesn't exist. It was released only technically, sold about 25,000 copies, almost all of which were refunded. The server was shut down within 11 days, and the game is just being written off as a complete loss. That's bad. Then they had this big win with Astrobot. And then this. So with the PS5 Pro, though, I don't want it partially because of the price tag and partially because of what it symbolizes. But on the price tag element of it, it just seems very, I don't know. It seems like they just didn't understand the market they're jumping into. To say at this point in time in 2024, when everybody is complaining about the high prices of groceries and all these other things, that you're like, oh, this optional piece of entertainment that isn't even our next gen system is going to cost $700, and here's all the things it doesn't come with. That seems like a big ask. Now, we could be wrong. It might come out and sell like gangbusters. I mean, I'm just basing this on my own opinions, plus the people I saw reacting to it based on Twitter and all that, which, you know, is like a poll. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. But it's just kind of my take. It's just what I think that's very, I don't know. It's a way to not read the room on Sony's part. And I don't know. But at the same time, you have to look at it from their perspective, which is, all right, this is where I'm going to defend Sony potentially. Okay, potentially, because I don't have access to all this information. We do know that this year they don't really have some major crazy game that they're expecting to sell like gangbusters. In fact, I think last year when the anniversary of the PS5 came up, I kind of predicted this, and I said I didn't think they were really going to have anything that major, so probably PS5 Pro was going to be their big push. That's clearly what they're doing. And that PS5 Pro was probably going to be intended as the GTA 6 machine. We've heard stories about that for a while, that this was like the definitive way to play it. It was going to be exclusive to consoles first before it gets to PC. I don't know for how long, if that's even still true. But that objectively it would run best on a PS5 Pro. So they seem to be banking on a game they don't own being the thing that makes this thing worthwhile. And also just getting people excited around that. Bold strategy. It might have even worked if it actually shipped with GTA 6, but at the same time, GTA 6, to my understanding, is not coming out for like another year anyway. So it's like, that seems like a strange plan, but if you had nothing else to offer your audience, this was kind of it. Plus, you can't hold off on it any longer, because if you don't release it, then you're getting closer to like just it having an even shorter lifespan. So that's a strange position. Now, as far as other factors go, obviously Sony took a bath on Concord, although I don't think that played too big of a role, if any role at all, in this situation. They haven't been doing all that well lately. Obviously, the whole concept of PS5 has no games hasn't gone anywhere. People still say that all the time. That's hurting their image. And from a kind of a development standpoint, we don't know how much money they put into this in R&D, and if they reached a point where they had no choice but to release it, I don't know. But we also don't know the other factors that might be contributing to this price point. Obviously, inflation is one of them. Inflation is a very real thing. And it's one of those things where you have to sit there and just kind of like study the history of it. And the older you get, you realize prices annoy you more, because you remember when things used to be cheaper, and then you start sounding like your grandparents. So I decided to do, like I said at the beginning of this, I decided to do a little calculation and check certain things. This is cheaper than the than PS3 was, by far. It actually is about on par with the price of the Neo Geo CD. Neo Geo CD came out in 1994 for about $400, and today would be a little over $800, which if you got the disc drive and the stand or whatever for just the disc drive, if you got the PS5 Pro and the disc drive, it would be about the same as far as inflationary adjustment is concerned as the Neo Geo CD and PS5 Pro. Now, the Neo Geo CD was considered the cheaper alternative to the AES, but that was created for the Rolls-Royce market. You know, these people who just want a very particular special gaming experience, and the Neo Geo CD was supposed to be the downgraded, cheaper version, and actually did okay considering what its target was, with only about 80 games released. So there isn't a whole lot of precedent for this. It's just kind of, you have to wonder what Sony's thinking here. Do they think this actually replaces the PS5, like the PS4 Pro essentially did? Or are they thinking like people will just suck up and buy this? Do they completely misunderstand the audience? Or, you know, or is this really just meant as like the one-off for the super fans. Is that what this is supposed to be? Because I don't really buy that argument too much, only because it doesn't ship with a disk drive. Your super fans probably would have wanted that. They didn't even offer that option unless you buy the detachable thing. So I don't know, man. It is weird. It's an interesting time to be like kind of living through this, because you're actually seeing, like, you know, your oldness, for lack of a better way, play out in real time. Because to me, it's not only being like, wow, we've hit a certain financial benchmark where you go, oh, back in my day it cost this, but at the same time, you're also, from my perspective, same time, the physical media generation, looking on it and just being like, wow, they did it. They actually are announcing a system that just doesn't support physical media unless you have some special 32X like add-on, effectively. And I don't know, man. It's like, on one part, I wanted to talk to you guys about this, and on the other part, it's just like almost like therapeutic. I think for all of us who are millennials, especially, who are kind of in our mid to late 30s, early 40s, whatever it is. Yeah. So, that said, I'm genuinely curious. What do people think about this? You know, are you? I did not see a whole lot of people who are actually excited about it. Actually, I will say this. Most people, at least on Twitter, again, which is just a poll effectively, and Facebook as well, seem to agree with the general consensus that this was bad as far as pricing goes. But there were those detractors, which is, of course, what you would expect. But the detractors always seem to be of the same mindset. I didn't get anybody who was like super excited about this like new half generation of hardware. They seem to be more about like, yay, the death of physical media because it's been holding things back. At least that's the perspective. I had actually numerous people who defended it, who also at the same time, when people would press on them and be like, aren't you worried about like the absence of consumer rights? The response was always the same. And this should tell you a lot and why you should be scared of these people. The response was always, I don't care. I played it once and I don't ever need to do that again. Meaning there is a large subsect of people that are very willing to trade their consumer rights and yours in exchange for nothing. I guess arguably some measure of convenience, which is usually what people trade their rights away for, by the way, is for convenience. Personally, I value my rights, and that includes consumer protections and the concept of the property of ownership. I don't like the idea that everything can exist in a digital ecosystem where I don't have say over anything. You know, I mean, say what you want about, PC gaming. At least it has multiple choices, Steam, Epic, and of course GOG. I personally don't subscribe to any of those for the same reason. They also, by their own admission, do not consider them property. But at least, there are options. That's the benefit of competition. If Sony has exclusive control over their own internal distribution system digitally, then the right of ownership is gone. And I think that's something worth fighting for. Physical media has always been the easiest way to represent the concept of ownership, even though it at best was technically just a lease, if you will, between you and the original company. Because like when you see all these games behind me, I don't actually own these. I own the physical plastic and the game happens to come on it. But at the same time, this is a bunch of Sega Genesis stuff. Sega can never come for me and say like, you owe us the license back. It was temporary. It's like, they're never going to do that. And the same cannot be said about digital media, as we see more and more examples of, particularly Sony has had a bad track record over the last couple of years about pulling down servers and all that. But yeah, I think this video has gone on long enough. I really just want to get everybody's take on this. What are you guys thinking? Are there people out there that are genuinely excited about this? Are there people that want to buy this? Is everybody in protest of it? I just want to know. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. If you do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.